I'm Dwayne Brown. Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, a state of emergency in California sends more firefighters and resources to the front lines.
The fires, once they start going, they become very difficult to deal with and very expensive.
Tens of thousands of people forced out of their homes tonight, and the connection Governor Brown highlights as one we can't ignore.
And will San Diego County see more Syrian refugees? I'm Peggy Pico. How local organizations help refugees start over. Plus, most of San Diego's honeybees are Africanized. What's the risk of being stung, and why these bees are good for the garden?
Questa nostra casa.
This home of ours is being ruined, and that damages everyone, especially the poor.
The Pope's call for open hearts and minds as the world deals with climate change. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. A devastating firestorm in Northern California prompting a state of emergency. Drought conditions and high temperatures fueled this fast-moving wildfire in Lake County. The state says 13,000 people were forced out of their homes about 20 miles north of Napa Valley. A disabled elderly woman died inside her home. 10,000 people were under evacuation orders due to another big fire burning less than 200 miles away from the Sierra Nevada. People have packed evacuation centers there as flames destroyed hundreds of homes. Right now, more than 11,000 firefighters are battling 12 large fires around the state. 4 firefighters from the fire in Lake County are recovering tonight from burn injuries. Wildfires have burned more than 650,000 acres this year in California. The Governor Brown, says fighting wildfires and climate change are connected.
Unlike a fire that you can mobilize and react to, this is something that builds up over decades and centuries. But that doesn't mean you can ignore it. And that's the reason why I've emphasized so much for California to deal with climate change as well as the immediacy of fires.
During a briefing at the Office of Emergency Services, the governor said a third round of soldiers from the California National Guard are deploying to fire lines. He says the state has enough money to continue fighting fires this year without having to dip into the rainy day fund. A grim milestone for California's water supply. We're now learning this year's snowpack may be the lowest in more than 500 years. Governor Brown called for historic water cuts after state experts measured what was left of the snowpack back in April. A new study published today is the first to look at the Sierra Nevada snowfall. Researchers used tree ring data to create a drought timeline. They also cited winter temperatures among the highest on record. In advance of the strengthening El Nino this fall, more people are applying for rain barrel rebates in San Diego. The city will refund $1 a gallon up to $400 for residential rain barrels. Residents must turn in before and after photos along with receipts to apply. We've got more info online at kpbs.org/rainbarrel. Police on the campus of San Diego State are investigating a possible burglary and sexual assault. It involved 4 suspects on campus early Sunday morning. KPBS reporter Angela Carone has this update.
According to a spokesperson for campus police, suspects stole personal items of several residents after a female student invited them into the dorm. The female student told police she was forced to touch one of the suspects' genitals, which constitutes sexual battery. A spokesperson for campus police told KPBS 3 of the suspects, 2 juveniles and 1 adult, arrived at San Diego Police Department Monday morning, accompanied by a parent, to talk about the case. SDSU police will conduct interviews with the subjects as part of the investigation. Angela Carone, KPBS News.
Every year, San Diego lifeguards do a summer campaign to remind the public about the do's and don'ts of water safety. They say it's important to be especially vigilant when kids are near water. Family and friends gathered Sunday at Mission Bay Park for a prayer vigil after 4-year-old Wesley Hillier's body was discovered. His aunt says it was his first time ever going to the beach. Police believe the drowning was accidental and don't suspect foul play. San Diego lifeguard Andy Laram says the incident occurred after hours when no one was on duty.
Regardless of your age, you always want to swim with a buddy, and only do it in areas protected by lifeguards, at a pool with a lifeguard, or at a bay or a beach with lifeguard protection. Or if you're in a backyard, make sure that there's an adult who assumes the responsibility of a lifeguard.
A makeshift memorial has been set up near Leisure Lagoon in Mission Bay. That's where the boy's body was recovered by Harbor Police Sunday morning. The medical examiner will determine the official cause of death. A snapshot on crime in San Diego shows violent attacks and property crime remained steady last year. The study from Sandag found a drop in reported homicides and robberies, but a slight uptick in the number of rapes and aggravated assaults. Researchers say the numbers are notable due to Proposition 47 and the state's prison realignment that led to more ex-offenders returning to San Diego communities. There were concerns crime rates would also go up. A plan to build 1,700 homes on land near Valley Center is one step closer to reality. County Planning Commission voted 4-3 Friday to recommend allowing the Lilac Hills project to go ahead. It would require a major amendment to the county's general plan, which allows only about 100 homes on the site. The commission also recommended the developer pay for a new school and a new or expanded fire station. County supervisors are expected to have the final say next month. Chula Vista is in the midst of an effort to upgrade the city's smart infrastructure. The city manager there says Chula Vista has hired a consultant to help figure out if a major bayfront development is on the right track. The idea is to have the 530-acre development project to incorporate gigabyte speed internet. The goal is to make Chula Vista more attractive for future development. Mayors from the world's two biggest economies, the U.S. and China, are at a summit in Los Angeles, nailing down agreements to fight climate change. The plans were set last fall during President Obama's trip to Beijing. They include promoting clean air and lowering greenhouse emissions. Lawmakers say they hope the summit inspires other world leaders. Changing the conversation on climate change, Pope Francis is the first pontiff to address it head-on, calling on the faithful and world leaders to work on a solution. It's an issue at the top of his agenda during his first visit to the U.S. next week. Associated Press reporter Tracy Brown says the Pope faces some high-profile skeptics on his tour.
Rising temperatures, rising sea levels, increasingly violent storms. In June, Pope Francis became the first pope ever to call climate change a largely man-made problem.
Questa nostra casa.
This home of ours is being ruined, and that damages everyone, especially the poor.
The Pope's encyclical changing the conversation about faith and the environment for the Church's 1.2 billion Catholics.
The Pope is inviting the world to a dialogue, and so he's basically saying, let's sit down and talk about these things. Prudence tells us that if scientists are telling us to be concerned, we would be foolish not to be concerned.
Already growing signs of green stewardship. In Miami, the Our Lady of Guadalupe Church is being built to strict new energy-saving standards.
To actually use the natural light that we have so many days here in Miami, and that will allow us to save a lot of energy.
As American Catholics prepare to roll out the red carpet for Pope Francis in September, they'll be joined by some environmental activists.
People of all faiths in the United States are concerned about this issue just because it's beginning to affect them in their daily lives. They see that spring is coming earlier, that wildfires are lasting longer, that droughts are happening in the West. And so there's a confluence of religious enlightenment and awakening and just personal concern over their livelihoods.
Pope Francis is widely expected to repeat calls for bold actions against climate change during his U.S. tour.
He'll be forthright, he'll be clear, he'll be blunt, and he'll be honest. And I think basically we want to open our minds and open our hearts to listen to him.
He'll also face some of the most prominent U.S. climate skeptics, House Republicans.
This Pope he's not afraid to challenge everyone's thinking on issues, frankly, one way or another.
Pope Francis reframing the climate debate just as the UN prepares to hold a global conference in December. Tracy Brown, Associated Press.
A bill with new requirements during oil spills is headed to Governor Brown's desk after a massive oil spill last May near Santa Barbara beaches. Hundreds of birds, sea lions, dolphins, and other sea life were affected. The bill requires operators who drill and transport oil and gas to reduce the amount of oil released. Damaging land, threatening freshwater supplies. A new investigation of state records shows a largely overlooked side effect of oil and gas production. Associated Press reporter John Moan shows us landowners struggling with a toxic byproduct.
For us out here, it'd be just ruin.
On the high plains of eastern New Mexico, Carl and Justin Johnson tend their cattle.
It's just a way of life, more than ranching, just a way of life.
The windswept land has sustained the family for 4 generations, and for about just as long, the Johnsons have battled oil companies drilling throughout the ranch.
They just don't give a damn.
The father and son are old-school cowboys who don't mince their words about their oil industry neighbors.
It was sterilized. There was no vegetation whatsoever.
They lease the land from the state on which their livestock graze, but they cannot prevent oil companies from drilling here. 5 years ago, 420,000 gallons of oil-filled wastewater spilled on the land. It's a byproduct of oil and gas exploration. The toxic metal and salt-laden water turned the acreage into a hard, crusty moonscape.
And the oil companies, they could do what we asked them to do, and it wouldn't even make a blip on their expense sheet.
The Johnsons say they've spent tens of thousands of dollars, mainly in legal and environmental costs, taking oil and gas drillers to task for not properly cleaning or preventing wastewater spills.
See over there, this is all saltwater disposal leaks.
Their plight shows a largely overlooked side effect of oil and gas production: wastewater spills that foul the land, kill wildlife, and threaten freshwater supplies.
If you have a brine spill that is not properly attended, basically that land that's been impacted has been taken.
Carrie Sublette is a soil remediation expert who works on projects to repair land damaged by saltwater and oil spills.
Brine spills are a huge issue. Anywhere that you have oil and gas production, you're going to have releases.
The Associated Press took a look at data from top oil-producing states and found over a 6-year period more than 175 million gallons of oil wastewater spills, either from ruptured pipes, overflowing storage tanks, deliberate dumping, or accidents.
It will recover, but it'll probably take about 5 years before we start really growing anything right in this area.
Just like what happened to Don Stoker, who lives in Snyder, Texas.
Once the pipeline ruptured over here, it flowed through the terrace system out into my field, and then it started draining out of the field, and then the salt stayed on the surface to a certain extent, causing the damage out here.
That was in 2012. This soil is only producing green shoots 3 years later.
You're never going to find a risk-free form of energy, whether we're talking renewables or fossil fuel development.
Katie Brown, a spokeswoman for an education group tied to the oil industry, says American energy production is way up, but claims in proportion wastewater spills are down.
The men and women who work in the oil and gas industry are absolutely committed to spill prevention. They live in these communities. They want their environment to be preserved as well.
Oil companies pay to repair those spills because they have to. It's the law in most states. But even with the cleanup, ranchers Carl and Justin Johnson say their ranch land will never be the same. John Moan, Associated Press, Crossroads, New Mexico.
Ministers of the European Union failed to reach agreement on a plan to share 120,000 refugees arriving in Italy, Greece, and Hungary. Peggy Pico continues our coverage of the Syrian refugee crisis with a look at refugee assistance here in San Diego.
Every year, about 2,700 refugees resettle in San Diego County. Catholic Charities of San Diego is one of 4 local organizations that help refugees start over. My guest, Robert Moser, is Deputy Director with their Refugee Resettlement Program. And Robert, where are most of the refugees, where are they coming from, the ones that settle here in San Diego?
The majority of refugees currently arriving in for the last 5 or 6 years are coming from Iraq. We also have a large Somali population, Burmese, Congolese. We have one of the largest Cuban populations in Southern California, and other countries like Ethiopia.
A wide range, I've heard you say. Now, you work with Syrian refugees families here in San Diego, too. How is it decided where they resettle? How do they get to San Diego?
Well, that's a long process. First, they have to be admitted into the United States. And usually refugees who come to San Diego come to join family members. And so if they have a relative here, that will be their anchor. If they're a non-U.S. Thai refugee, that's decided by our capacity here in this area to accept new groups and the whether or not other cities have that same capacity.
Now, we're looking at video of refugees in Hungary. But back here closer to home, what are some of the challenges refugees face once they get here?
Well, starting a new life, learning a new language, finding a job, adjusting to the culture and to the climate, giving up from where they, making them recognize that they're no longer where they're at and they have to start a new life here.
Yeah, they're starting here. You were saying language, school, jobs. We recently learned that some European countries will only accept refugees who are Christian. Is religion a factor when it comes to resettling refugees here in San Diego?
No, absolutely not. Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Service, we resettle refugees of all faiths. I'm sure that Pope Francis would have something to say about the willingness and openness of people to welcome anybody into their home.
What types and services are available through your organization or the other ones here for refugees here?
Well, we help them get started. We find them housing, we enroll their children in school, we provide food assistance, we provide assistance in how to get a job and apply for Social Security and food stamps, Medi-Cal, things of that nature.
Sure. And who pays for those services?
Well, the federal government provides the support for the work of the refugee resettlement programs.
In light of the refugee crisis over in Europe, do you expect more Syrian refugees here?
Well, the president announced 10,000. This is the time of year when he does the presidential consultation with Congress. So typically we get about 3 to 4% of the national total here in San Diego. So if there's 10,000, we might expect between 300 and 400 Syrians at some point.
Considering the political situation over in Syria, are there particular issues that Syrian refugees here face that maybe other refugees wouldn't? Or do they all face similar issues as far as persecution and things like that?
Right. In order to qualify for resettlement in the United States, you have to be fleeing a well-founded fear of persecution. So all groups that have come have gone through the same types of trauma to some degree or other in their own native country, and so there's no uniqueness to them.
All right. Robert Moser, thank you so much for the update on this.
You're welcome.
A bill on Governor Brown's desk could make California among the first states to require children younger than 2 to ride in rear-facing car seats. That's currently the law for infants under 1 year old. Lawmakers say it aligns with new recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Some conservative lawmakers oppose it. If passed, it includes a 1-year grace period. The foster care system would be overhauled under a bill passed by the state legislature. It moves the state away from long-term group homes for foster children. The author of the bill says the state must increase efforts to recruit and retain caregivers who are family members or close friends. The bill provides for more training and support for foster parents. It also includes recommendations from a report on foster care reform. The measure is awaiting action from Governor Brown. UC San Diego researchers have identified a potential risk factor for PTSD. It's called heart rate variability, or HRT. That's the measure of the time interval between heartbeats. Researchers measured the HRT of more than 1,500 Marines. Both before and after deployment, researchers discovered Marines with low HRT before deployment were more likely to develop PTSD compared with Marines with normal HRT.
I'm Hari Srinivasan. On the next News Hour, Miles O'Brien explores the latest tests on a possible Ebola vaccine. That's Monday on the PBS News Hour.
The buzz over honeybees in San Diego. Researchers say most of them are Africanized bees. Peggy Pico explains where they may have come from and where they may be going next.
The first Africanized bees in San Diego County were discovered in 1994. Since then, the species continues to migrate northward, and a new study finds the bees are approaching Sacramento. My guest, Joshua Cohn, professor of biology at UC San Diego, co-authored the study. And Joshua, how many bee species are there here in the U.S., and how did Africanized bees actually get to California?
So most people think of bees as honeybees, but there are many, many species of bees, many of which are not social. They're called solitary bees. And in San Diego, we are a global biodiversity hotspot, and there's over 500 species of bees that are native to San Diego.
And is it easy to, well, how'd they get here, actually? How did the Africanized bees get here?
So first of all, European honeybees in general, got here from by Europeans bringing them for honey production. And for breeding purposes, African bees were brought to Brazil some decades ago, and unfortunately some escaped and have been hybridizing with European honeybees from Brazil south into Argentina and north now all the way to California.
So now we've got these hybrid bees, as you call them. Is it easy to spot the difference between, say, an Africanized bee and a regular honeybee here in San Diego?
Even an expert cannot by eye tell an Africanized honeybee from a European honeybee.
So you would have to measure or do something else?
So we use genetic tools or a set of careful measurements to distinguish the bees.
Yeah, and we were looking at an Africanized bee, which looks like every other honeybee here, so it's hard to tell the difference. How likely is it to see Africanized bees here, let's say in your front yard or backyard in San Diego?
So we collected honeybee workers everywhere in San Diego County, both in urban areas and in the backcountry, and about 2/3 of those honeybees are Africanized.
And they're called foraging or feral bees, right?
Well, we showed also that these bees are largely not from classic managed hives, those white boxes that you see, but are feral, wild honeybees.
All right. Now, earlier this month, a Riverside construction worker was actually stung to death after approaching an Africanized hive. Since San Diego County has a majority, I understand, of their honeybees are Africanized, is there a higher risk of a bee attack here?
There's a higher risk than there was before 1994. It's still not a terribly high risk. There are many lovely activities to do outside in San Diego, and I wouldn't say that this should prevent anybody from going around. And I should also say that those worker bees that you see are not the danger. It's only when you approach a hive that aggression is observed.
Right. I understand that aggression is, protecting the hive and swarming and things like that. What are the benefits of having these hybrid bees here?
Well, these Africanized bees have replaced European bees everywhere from Brazil north to California, so they must have some advantages over the European form, and maybe we can put some of those to use. So they may be more disease resistant than European bees, and we might in fact be able to use some of their genetic diversity to breed a better, more resistant managed honeybee.
Now, your study actually tracked the migration of these bees here upwards toward Sacramento. And so how far are they likely to go? Are they going to keep going upward and outward?
Well, nobody really knows. There's been some predictions made based on how far south into Argentina they got, and then predicting based on the climate there how far north they would get here. They've already exceeded those predictions somewhat, but we've also been having warmer and warmer weather. So I think those predictions are pretty accurate, and that they're not likely to go a whole lot farther north.
Because
they do more poorly where winters are cold.
I see. Now, you're currently studying Africanized bees' DNA. What do you hope to find there?
We hope to find what genomic regions come from Africa versus Europe, and what genes are in those regions, and ultimately perhaps find the regions of the genome that are responsible for aggression, and we could breed the rest of the African genes in and leave those out, and perhaps make a better honeybee for agricultural purposes.
All right. Well, Joshua Cohn, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Crossing the finish line, a San Diego runner is headlining the upcoming New York Marathon. Meb Keflezighi, known most recently for winning the 2014 Boston Marathon 1 year after the fatal bombings, joining other running champions. San Diego High School product is a three-time Olympian who earned a silver medal in 2004. Keflezighi won the New York Marathon 6 years ago. He will also help fundraise for running programs for youth. We're expecting a slight chance of rain in San Diego tonight as a low pressure system moves in with moisture from former tropical storm Linda. Looking at 80s and 70s over the next few days along the coast. Chance of showers inland, 70s, 80s there. 70s as well in the mountains with things clearing up by Thursday. Thunder and lightning in the desert. Look at that, dropping back into the 90s finally. And here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On Morning Edition, a city commission in LA County drawing big headlines for its appointees. 2 people living in the country illegally. The worries over how they got the job. And on Midday Edition, the NAACP in San Diego plans a march and rally for the National Journey for Justice. That's tomorrow on KPBS Radio. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.